All right, and today we are continue with the invertebrates. Invertebrates, more than that, that's the internet connection is unstable. More than that, we continue with the protostomes. Everything what we talked before are the protostomes. Remember, embryonic development, the blastopore, the future development of the blastopore. If it will develop into a mouth, that's a protostome. If it develops into something else, there is anus, it will be a deuterostomes. There will be only two groups which we'll cover later on for the deuterostomes. That's the technically three. We will cover briefly three. Well, we'll talk about extensively about echinoderms. We briefly talk about hemichordates and then the chordates. So those three groups. But yeah, hemichordates will not have a lab on that. On other ones, on the echinoderms as well as the chordates will have the lab. So everything else are protostomes essentially. So make sure that you understand that. Oh, speaking of the quick short answers, some of you come up with some of the strange examples. I'm always asking for examples because it will give me the understanding if you understand, well, give me the preview if you understand what you're writing or not. Species, be specific. Species are important, and we don't just say mollusks. Mollusks are not a species, it's a whole group of them known as the phylum. So, but if you'll say clam, that's one of the mollusks, and it's technically it's a genus, but you still can use it, or slug, or snail, or specifically garden snake. Be specific, because I had several students answering something like insects. Well, insects is the largest class of them all. I mean, millions of species. So be more specific. You can say a honeybee. That would be a better, or just a bee, or bumblebee, or a dog, or a wolf, coyote, right? Alligator, ravens. Speaking of ravens, there was another example, and it kind of translated among the several, something along the line that example of evolution or flightless birds. Here we go. Flightless birds. So birds lost the ability to fly. I agree with that statement. And then there was an example to that particular statement, something along the line like ravens become penguins, or ravens become ostriches, or something like that. Or ravens, it was a ravens, that's because it's one of the mascots of St. Jack, right? Central campus, I think. So in this particular case, ravens by themselves did not evolve in ostriches or penguins or emus or what have you. No, that's not it. They had a common ancestor with the ostriches. At some point of time, they broke off and they will ended up with the flightless birds where ostriches are, and then they had their own evolution and whatever the modern ravens are. So don't just say that ravens become dinosaurs becoming a modern birds. I'll be okay with that. So be careful with that. All right, moving on. So specifics, always an interesting thing. So moving on. So mollusks. Mollusks belong to Lophotrophozoi, and we talk about the tentacles, kind of, at least in the larvae stage. So 100,000 species. That's a pretty large phylum because it's so diverse. You can find lots of different sizes, shapes, forms, herbivores, carnivores, of course, bottom feeders. Some of them are parasites, and generally it's a soft body animals. As we talked before, we were talking about like worms. All worms are soft body, but now mollusks kind of step it up and they start protecting that soft body with a shell. Shell generally is made out of calcium carbonate. Not all of them, again, so some of them start losing it later on, and we'll talk about like octopuses. They don't have a shell, or slugs don't have a shell no more. They lost it second. And generally, the structure of the body can be subdivided into three major parts. The foot, right? The foot, the muscular organ, then the mantle. Mantle is basically, think about it. Think about the, and I'll show you momentarily a picture of the snail, but the snail or slug, whatever is, it's sliding or slithering over, that's the foot, right? And then there will be a kind of skin which is covering internal organs. All of the internal organs known as the visceral mass. And visceral mass is covered by the structure known as the mantle, all right? Xylem confined. Remember, we're talking about pseudocoelomates, acoelomates, pseudocoelomates, true coelomates. True xylem means the body cavity located within the mesoderm only. So xylem, they are coelomates, but it's a small area surrounding the heart. And then, of course, they have something which is known as the open circulatory system. Most of them. There is a group, a very advanced group, which has a closed circulatory system. But open circulatory system versus closed circulatory system, we'll talk about that about a month from now when we'll discuss the anatomy or fine aspects of the anatomy. But I'll kind of introduce what exactly is open circulatory system and the closed circulatory system. We start with the heart, the pump, or it could be several of them, right? The heart is the heart of the circulatory system. Yes, in this particular case, the heart pumps blood. It don't have to be a blood. There is a different names depending what exactly it carries. It could be a hemolymph, but the heart pumps the liquid one way specifically. Okay, and if that particular blood vessel or vessel takes the blood or hemolymph away from the heart, it's known as the artery. Artery is any kind of blood vessel which takes the blood away from the heart. So we have heart pumping into the blood vessels, large blood vessels splits into a smaller one, creating a network of tubes, right? Everybody understand that? Everybody understand the basic anatomy, what we have here. And then the smaller blood vessels, capillaries, spreads out. This is where the main exchange of the nutrients occurs within the tissue. They're going through the tissue, then they're collecting, and then they start increasing in sizes, merging in, and eventually you will end up with several very large vessels, blood vessels, which taking blood back to the heart. The blood or the liquid, that particular liquid blood, essentially stays within the circulatory system in a closed circuit. Makes sense? That's the closed circulatory system. This is what we have. By we, I'm talking about the vertebrates. Now, many of the invertebrates will have the open circulatory system. So again, blood pumping goes in, and then whenever the blood vessels start spreading out, the blood literally dripping out, spills out. Where it goes to? Into the body cavity. So it's leaving the circulatory system and literally spills out into the body cavity and the internal organs. So most of the internal organs are literally bathing in the blood or hemolymph, whatever it might be. And then as the heart is pumping more liquid or more, let's call it blood for simplicity's sake. So more blood comes out, that pushes the other blood out of the cavity back into the circulatory system. There will be a special something which is known as the sinuses. This is how the blood re-enters the circulatory system. So in a closed circulatory system, blood will stay within the circulatory system. In the open circulatory system, the blood will literally spills out. And we'll talk about that later. It's just that the examples where we'll discuss the open versus closed circulatory system, because most of the creatures will have open circulatory system. The most advanced ones, squids and octopus, they will have, and Yes, squids, octopus, and something which known as the cephalopods. They have a closed circulatory system. They are extremely advanced creatures. So then they have something which known as the metanephridia. Metanephridia is something which is known as the part of the reproductive system. There was a protonephridia. We're talking about the flaming cells, protonephridia, and they have more advanced tubes to eliminate the waste. So metanephridia, and again, we'll talk about that in much greater detail when we'll discuss excretory system in the animals. And again, that would be about a month or so from now. But any kind of excretory system is the network of tubes, our, let's say, kidneys, right? That's the main organ of the excretory system of humans, or actually invertebrates. They are a network of tubes, and we'll discuss that. Many of the mollusks, they will have a very unique tongue-like organ. It's located in the mouth. So like tongue, it's not exactly the same tongue as we have. It's the convergent evolution again. But on the radula, they have a tiny little bitty, very sharp teeth. So if you have ever seen that whenever the, let's say, slug eating the strawberry, it's not really chewing on a strawberry. It's licking the strawberry, but because it has a teeth on its tongue, it's scraping it off the tissue from the strawberries. Make sense? All right, and then of course the examples. I'll think about any kind of seafood. If you like seafood, you pretty much probably tried most of it, right? So clams, lumpet, probably did slugs, snails. You can buy some of them. Squids, actually, here we have squids and squids, oysters, conchs, and squids and octopus, calamari, right? Yeah, squid. So here what we essentially have, look at it's a typical kind of generic picture of the snail. So a muscular organ on which it slides, known as the foot or slither. Then we have the covering for all of the internal organs, and within the internal organs it has a radula. See the mouse, radula, kind of tongue-like structure, but it has the very sharp teeth, so it's scraping stuff out. And then of course it goes into the stomach, from the stomach goes into the intestine, and then out. They have an open circulatory system. So again, look at this particular thing. We have the heart pumping the blood into where? Why it stops? Because the blood literally spills out, and all of those internal organs are bathing in the blood, and then it collects, and somewhere here they have gills, so to aerate, to bring the oxygen to the blood. So here what we generally have, and all of the internal organs known as the visceral mass will be surrounded or covered by the mantle. All right, so we will not go too deep into the anatomy. Also, look, this is the heart, and this is where the xylem will be located. Okay, xylem or heart is in the xylem. All right, so most shells will have 3 layers. You don't really have to worry much about that, but you probably heard about mother of pearl, very, very nice shiny one. That's one of those particular layers. Anyway, most of those particular creatures will have a separate sexes, means males and female. However, some of them will be a hermaphroditic. Generally, most of the snails, if you'll see a snail in your backyard or something like that, or in the front yard, doesn't really matter. Most likely that's the hermaphrodite, meaning it has a male and female gonads at pretty much the same time. Can it self-fertilize? Technically, yes, but most of the snails will find a pair. And well, there is you can look it up. There is I didn't put that as the to watch the video, but there is a videos on YouTube which is called the love dance of the snails or something like that. They really it's quite intricate courtship between two snails, and then they will get together. And this is where it's getting a little bit strange. Let's say the sperm of the snail number one will be fertilized the eggs of the snail number two. During the same time, sperm of the snail number two will be fertilizing the eggs of the snail number one. So see, it's kind of cross-fertilization, technically speaking. So in many cases, it's external fertilization. Many of them are aquatic creatures, or they live in a very environment. So basically the female will lay eggs, and you might see it. We have invasive species of the snails, right? The mystery snail from the aquarium. Well, if you ever had the a fish tank and oranges, they're laying down the eggs, the bright orange eggs on the stems of any kind of aquatic plants, and then male usually fertilize, or male part will fertilize them sometimes, but internal, again, that was the key for colonizing the land. Why? Sperm have to swim through the water. Dry land, not much of the water available, so internal fertilization. Same idea as later on some of the vertebrates, starting with reptiles, come up with. They had to colonize the land. Amphibians started, but they still have to come back to the water for the reproduction. And then we ended up with a huge continent, Pangaea, where there was not enough water sources. As a result, they had to come up with something else, and that was the internal fertilization. And reptiles, including birds as well as the mammals, have the internal fertilization. Then there is something which is known as a larvae. Larvae is the small swimming creature, and we're not going too deep into that, but this particular larvae will possess the law of four, meaning that it will basically that's the reason why they belong to that particular supergroup. Now, 8 classes. Out of those 8 major classes, we will talk extensively about 3 gastropods. Well, we'll start with the bivalves in the lab, gastropods, and so there is also polyplacophorans, etc. But we're not going. Usually I'm showing in the lab one of the chitons, which belong to that particular polyplacophorans, but it looks like a slug. Some of them can grow relatively large with the shell, but the shell is not like a snail shell. It's like 8 overlapping plates of the shell, which is protecting the top of that particular creature. So make sure that you know about the gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. After all, that's the largest groups out of them all. So here one, polyplacophora, also known as the chitons, again, sea creatures. And in this particular case, they look like a sea slug, could be a large one. I brought several of them from the Pacific coast, about 2.5, 3 inches long. And then there will be shells right on top of them, but they are not fused. It's a separate shell plates, usually 8-plated shell. And then we have a gastropods. That's the largest of them all. Remember, out of about 100,000 species, we're looking at 75 gastropod. Gastros means stomach, podos means leg. They slithering, or they moving on the stomach, so to speak. And this is where you will find the typical shells, the active marine, terrestrial, aquatic, freshwater creatures. So this is the very, very diverse group. And also some of them already lost to secondary, lost the shell, and we know those are slugs or nudibranches, which is a marine type of slugs. Then we have bivalves. Bivalves, bi means two, valves means side, so the shell is made out of 2 parts. It can open up and then close it down. So think about the oysters or anything like that, and those ones are not actively moving, or they are actively moving much. Yes, they can move, but not too much. As a result, they just sit somewhere in the substrate. It could be inside the sand, it could be on the any kind of rocks, and they sucking the water in, getting any kind of oxygen and any plankton, and then they sucking the water out, consuming whatever they have. So clams, mussels, oysters. So here we go. Again, we're talking about the seafood. And then, of course, cephalopoda, about 1,000 species, and that's considered to be the most advanced class of them all first. And that's probably one of the most advanced invertebrate we know of. They are extremely complex. They have extremely complex eyes. They have extremely complex nervous system. They do have a brain. As a matter of fact, they have somewhere between 3 to 5 brains each. Well, they have a separate brain for each of the eyes, and I'll talk a little bit. That's a fascinating group. And then there is a very interesting group of the shelled cephalopods, Nautiluses, and those are known as the living fossils. They lived for quite, they were a very, very large group which were surviving for quite nicely for millions of years. And I'll talk a little bit, and I think I have some of the, yeah, I'll show you a couple of shells of those creatures. Quite interesting, very, very distinct shell. I don't have the actual shell of the actual Nautilus. I think I left it in the lab. Anyway, so let's kind of quickly go about the gastropods. Again, largest class. Shells can be reduced or lost. Bivalves, clams, and cephalopod, that's the most complex predators with the closed circulatory system. They don't have a radula, they have a beak-like jaw, and then only Nautilus has the external shell, and they have a foot which is modified into a muscular siphon, which is used by propulsion, so a reactive force. They are sending the water one way and they're moving in the opposite direction. So let's kind of take a look on some of the examples. Well, the clam, right, the garden snail. This is the chiton, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 overlapping plates, but it looks like a really like a slug. That's a sea slug, or that's a nudibranch, and you can see the gills coming out, external gills. We'll talk about that later on. Here we're looking at the relatively small octopus, about the size of the fist, a little bigger than that, but it's a nice and bright blue rings, which is showing that it's a very, very well, it basically shows off that don't touch me, you're gonna die. That's that particular creature. If it will bite the person will die within a few so it has a toxic bite. And what's really interesting, the toxicity or toxins are not coming from the octopus itself. It has a specific bacteria which producing those particular toxins, and the mother, whenever she's taking care of the little ones after they hatched, it's actually giving or sharing those bacteria with the little ones as well. So yes, and of course you can find those ones off coast of Australia. They pulsing a bright blue rings. Yes, it's protected species, small but yeah, deadly. Anyway, so let's kind of take a look on the bivalves. Bivalves, again, scallops, mussels, etc. Shell made out of 2 parts, right? Bivalves. No head. Why no head? Because they don't really move. They don't really move. What's happening? They're losing the head. There is no front end. They don't have the concentration of the sensors on top, well, in the front end. No much of the sensors, no brain. Therefore, they no head, little cephalization, no radula. They just sucking in the plankton, and I'll give you Quite an interesting example regarding that. So brainless, no regular, but very, very successful group. They sitting somewhere in the substrate, sucking the water out, letting it out, and getting whatever the plankton comes along. They have a gills, which is hangs down into the mantle cavity, and many of them can be sea or freshwater things. Right now, if you are on the boat, quite often it says, please do not spread the, I think it's tiger mussels, right? You have to wash and rewash your boat if you're moving from one lake to another specifically, because once again, you might ended up having those tiny little bitty eggs or larvae in the water, and then you're transferring it to another lake, and that's becoming a huge problem, especially up north, kind of central or Midwest, so to speak, because the tiger mussels, they don't have the natural predators, and they start reproducing. 2 years ago, 2019, right before, well, the Christmas break of 2000, from 2018 2019, before all that particular COVID thing happened, we went as the family to Chicago, New York State. We didn't stay in a city, but we stayed in Buffalo, New York, near the Niagara Falls, and then Boston. Anyway, we were in Chicago, and the Great Lakes. Well, the Chicago is located on one of the Great Lakes. Beautiful turquoise water, and we were kind of taking the bus, the tourist bus, which was talking about, well, driving around the downtown, showing the bean, and the tourist guide told us, you see that's beautiful water? I'm like, yes, we see that beautiful water. And he said, well, if you'll go back about 50 years ago in this particular place, you will see it's kind, and it would be not as blue. It would be more like brownish, greenish. I'm like, well, what happened? And the tourist guy says, well, the mussels. I'm like, what do you mean mussels? Well, the mussels ended up in the Great Lakes, and they start filtering out the water. So they drastically changed the ecosystem within those particular lakes, because they start consuming a lot of well, they start reproducing unchecked. They start consuming a lot of plankton. That particular plankton was used by the other creatures to be eaten, and those particular creatures start decreasing in numbers, mussels increasing in numbers. So the whole thing changed. Well, just a tiny little bitty headless girl changed the ecosystem or water quality within the Great Lakes, the largest lakes in the face of the earth. Well, not the deepest, but the largest, right? So sexes are separate, males and female. Male releasing the sperm into the water, sperm slowly floating in. The female will suck in, and if it's a proper species, it will fertilize the egg, and everything is fine. And then the eggs will develop into the larvae, and larvae, this is how they spread essentially. The larvae is free swimming. After a while, it will settle down and will turn into the adult organism. All right, moving on. So here we're looking at the really interesting creatures known as the Nautilus. Nautilus is the cephalopod, but this is the only, I think there is 2 species of the Nautilus, which are the shelled one. And the shell is very intricate. It has those particular chambers. The first, the very large chamber, actually occupied by the creature itself. And then you will have a tiny little bitty chambers, and let me kind of show you. I have the several shells, but this is how the fossilized shell of the Nautilus look like. All right, so right here you can see that's very intricate part, but if you'll cut it through, you will see those particular chambers inside. And those chambers increasing or decreasing the gas pressure will allow the Nautilus either go up or sink down in the ocean. This is a similar idea what we have in our submarines. We putting the air tanks, and then whenever we're releasing, whenever we're filling out those air tanks with the water, the submarine goes down. Or whenever we're putting the air in, the submarine goes up. Same kind of idea. Also, look at those particular eyes, right? Those eyes are very interesting, and right next to the eye, it has the separate brain. What's really interesting about those particular cephalopods, not only Nautilus, but we're talking about octopus as well, and squids, they don't have, in the eye, they don't have color receptors. Okay, makes sense? Color receptors are not present in the eye of the cephalopods. They don't see, technically, they don't see colors. They see only everything in black and white. However, those creatures can recognize the colors. They can recognize red from green, from blue, from yellow, and so on and so forth. How it's happening? Their brains interpreting, and as far as we understand that the light hitting the eye of the Nautilus, it will used as the diffraction. The diffraction of the light will happen, and depending where it will hit on in the eye, this is how the light will be interpreted as the color. So they're making up the colors in the brain. We're doing a similar thing, not exactly the same, not as complex as they are, but everybody see this particular color, right? The mouth is written in what color? In yellow. Our eyes have only three color pigments, right? We can recognize blue, red, and green, or RGB. We have only three sensors, or sensors which can sense either blue, green, or red. We don't have a sensor in our eye for the yellow at all. We cannot technically see it. The yellow is the interpretation of our brain. Whenever the red and the green hits at the same time or excite at the same time, our brain, our visual cortex interpret it as the yellow. Those guys went even further. All colors are made up. All right, makes sense, kind of. Yeah, there is lots of things happening there. So what exactly is happening? So the water getting in through the in-current siphon will be going through the cycle, so circle, and will go through the gills, aerating the gill because they have brains now. They have to have a lot of oxygen because brains are power hungry, and then the water will be pushed out of this way, so the creature will go the opposite way. Used to those particular creatures, again, they are millions of years old. You can the fossils, and there are used to be upper or better evolved creatures similar to those known as the ammonites. Here's the shell of the ammonite, very similar to that. They were more evolved, very large creatures. Some of them were like about 10 feet in diameter, very fast, very successful marine predators, but all of them died off. 65 million of years ago was the end of the ammonites. And now those great creatures, which were less complex, survived, and the ammonites, all of them died off. So here we're looking at the ammonite, and as you can see, that was a big creature right there. So anyway, that's briefly all about the mollusks. Remember, three major classes: the gastropods, the bivalves, and the cephalopods. Now, phylum Annelida. Annelids are segmented worms. So we were talking about flat worms, we were talking about roundworms. Now we're talking about segmented worms. Again, Acoelomates, 5,000 very diverse creatures. Most of them are aquatic or moist environments. All right. So they have to have a moist environment. Why? So the oxygen can penetrate. They don't really have any specialized organs for breathing. Therefore, the oxygen goes through this skin. One of the main ideas behind that the skin have to be wet in order for the gases to have the exchange. They have a very complex digestive system. Later on, we'll talk about the separate on the digestive systems. And one of the examples will be one of the annelids, specifically earthworms. Epidermis is a primary gas exchange. Some of them creating a parapodia, which they will start using it as kind of modified like a gill. Most of them hermaphroditic, males and females at the same time, but again, cross-fertilization. One worm coming to another and they cross-fertilize themselves. So here we go. And many of them will reproduce asexually through the regeneration. You have a, say, earthworm. If you'll cut it, and don't do that, that's well, I'm not sure. It definitely would not, well, that particular earthworm will not really be happy about that. Pain is, I'm not sure if it will feel pain. It definitely will feel something. So anyway, but if you'll cut the earthworm over a period of time, the tail will grow the head and the head will grow the tail. And that's known as the regeneration. So 3 classes in there, and one of them known as Oligaheta. Oligus means several, hetas means bristle. Few bristle on the body. Don't really see them, they are semi-transparent. The earthworm is one of the examples, and you've seen the earthworms, I'm sure of that. We have plenty of them here, especially after the rains. So earthworms, and that's, by the way, to my knowledge, is the only creature which is named after the planet it is in. I'm an earthworm. Okay, all right, cool. I'm from Earth, and I'm the lion. I'm the king. Yeah, but lion planet. Well, from the Earth. Well, I know I'm the worm from Earth, and this is the only thing the only creature which I know of named after the planet. If you know something else, please let me know. But because right now, the only creature which is named after the planet is a worm, earthworm, right? Anyway, so they have a bristles on each of the segments. You can see the body is segmented. On each of the segments, it has a very tiny little bitty bristles. So whenever it goes in the dirt, in the soil, it goes one way. If you try to pull it out, it basically helps it to move or dig underground. You will not be able to see those particular bristles, but you definitely can feel them. If you grab an earthworm, preferably alive, and you gently will kind of run your hand from the head to the tail, you will see that it's very, very smooth, almost slippery. If you try from the tail back, you'll start feeling that something is grabbing your fingers. It's not going that way. Earthworms are extremely beneficial. Well, first of all, you can use them as the bait if you are a fisher, right? Fisherman. But for the environment, they churning the soil. They putting some of the fresh nutrients in. They are feeding off the dying parts or dead parts of the plants generally. They also aerating the soil, so they extremely great for the enriching soil, in introducing the bacteria, breaking down the organic material. So a very important part, very well, not much to look at to begin with, but very important for the agriculture, so to speak. And then there is some of the examples. See, that's quite a nice worm. Here in Texas, I seen the worms about, the earthworm about the size of my pinky and about yay big. Actually, now when I was digging, well, I had them. We had a plot well, a fairly large piece of land, and I was digging something. I don't really remember what I was digging, and I found those particular very large ones. Yes, that one is of course from the Amazon. So very wet environment. Remember, they don't have the specialized organs for breathing, at least the alligator has. So that's, and we'll have the lab where briefly we'll talk about the some of the parts of the earthworm. So holy head, again, hetos means bristles. Now you can see those particular bristles. Those are marine creatures, and those particular bristles, they have many of them, many. So in this particular case, most of them marine, and those particular bristles start helping them with actual move, and they know known as the parapodia. Para means near, podos legs. It's kind of like legs. And of course, at the front, those parapodia increasing in sizes. As a result, they start helping in the gas exchange, similar to the gills. Not exactly the gills, but similar to increasing the surface area, more exchange of gases can occur. So in this particular case, yes, we'll see those examples in the lab as well. So here's some of them, and they live in the literally under the sand. That's pretty much goes through the sand. Whatever they cannot digest, they excreting. That picture is from the Pacific coast, like Oregon coast, and you can see during the low tide, you can see that tons of them. They are everywhere in the sand. Those particular lugworms. And of course, they become the food for all kinds of marine creatures as well. So they're very important in this sense as well. And the last one, Hirudinea leeches. This is the parasites, external parasites. There is quite a few of those. Generally, they stay, they suck blood, they lay eggs, and everybody's happy, right? Well, except the person or creature which they sucking blood from. What's really, yes, they can feed on some of them are actually active predators. They feed on the invertebrates. Many of them are parasitic, means they have to have a bloody snack, so to speak. They are extremely important from the medicinal value. As a matter of fact, whenever the medicinal leech bite the person, kind of cut through the skin, it's injecting a very specific protein known as a hin, which stops the coagulation of blood, meaning that the blood, instead of coagulating, goes and filling up that particular creature. And that particular chemical, that particular protein, nowadays we are able to synthesize it, and we are using it to prevent the blood clots, etc. So, and whenever we're treating the bruising or anything like that, that's a source of pharmaceuticals. Single leech can increase literally 4-5 times its size, fed or unfed. And here are some of the nice pictures, so you can see that particular leech, and now we're looking at the fully fed. There was a quite interesting story a couple of years from Great Britain. The lady, I don't remember all of the details. She went to somewhere in the Southeast Asia. I would say Vietnam. I might be wrong on the country. And she had, like, vacation. Southeast Asia, everything's great, tons of exotic fruits and the very nice cuisine. Love Vietnamese cuisine. So anyway, and at some point of time of her trip, she went and swim in the lakes and the rivers, so all that, had fun. Overall, beautiful outdoors, etc. A couple of, a week after she came back, she developed the nosebleeds and the severe headaches. Well, actually, severe headaches would lead to the nose bleeding, and she didn't do much. She's like, well, maybe I'm just kind of adjusting from the trip or anything like that. But the headaches, severe headaches, and nosebleed continues. So she went to the doctor, and doctor started checking her out, and then he saw something literally lurking in her nostril, and apparently it was one of the leeches. So whenever she was swimming, one of the leeches was able to crawl up her nostril and was feeling fairly comfortable in there, feeding periodically, increasing in size. Whenever it was increasing, it started pressing the sinuses, hence the headache. And whenever it stopped feeding and detached itself, because of the hearing, the blood continued to flow. So she ended up with a nosebleed. So here we go. Well, the leech was extracted and then preserved, and I think the lady actually named it. You can look it up, all that particular stuff. So yeah. Anyway, that's the leeches, and I think there is another kind of nasty picture. So here we go. In some of the cases, it might kill the host, but in this particular case, several leeches ended up being in the nasal cavities of that particular duck, essentially. So, and in this particular case, whenever they fed up, they basically closed up the nasal cavity and the bird is suffocated. Yes, very sad. Now, another really quick small phylum. We will not have that in the lab, or I will not be talking about Onychophora in the lecture exam, but that's known as the velvet worms. Velvet worms is kind of combination. They are very interesting from the evolutionary point of view, going from the segmented worms into something which known, and it's not exactly the direct link. It's not like earthworm become an insect, but in this particular case, it shows two very important things. First of all, segmented bodies, and then legs. They look very, very kind of cutish. They are feeding off the dying of leaves, so not really nasty or anything like that. I have a friend who actually, and they grow really large, about 10 inches or so. They bear alive youngs, and you can see it's kind of a combination of amalgam, the merging of the worms and the arthropods, even though they have unsegmented, not segmented legs. So those ones, and if you touch, they are very, very soft to touch, velvety, hence the name velvet worms. So yes, I have a friend who has a couple of those creatures as his pets. They live in a terrarium. He set it up and they live there. Quite an interesting group of creatures, but that's pretty much all I will talk about the Onychophora. Now, phylum of Arthropoda. Arthros means joint. Podos means like arthritis, right? The problem with the joint. So Arthropoda is the jointed and podos leg, joint legs. More than half of all of the animals on Earth, species-wise, are actually arthropods. As a matter of fact, insects. But also there will be spiders, arachnids, crustaceans. Arachnids, we're talking about spiders as well as the ticks and such. Crustaceans, shrimp and crawfish, etc. Millipedes, centipedes, and then we'll talk a little bit about the trilobites. The main idea is segmented body, exoskeleton. So they're not a logotrophophore, they belong to a different group, same as the roundworms, and they periodically shed by the process known as the exodus. You've probably seen, maybe not the process itself, but the result of the process. Sometimes I'm coming into my front yard and I see the shell of the cicada, right? Cicada comes out from the ground, the larvae, and then it's turned into a cicada, which is annoying the heck out of everybody with the shrill sounds during the summer, typically, right? The problem with that particular exoskeleton, they have the exoskeleton. Exoskeleton is made out of chitin. It's a polysaccharide, same polysaccharide as the fungi made the cell walls. They don't have a cell walls, the animals. So they're encasing the body, essentially the soft body encased in the exoskeleton. The problem with that is, well, the really good exoskeleton provides them from any kind of predators so helps to provide. Predators also provides the really good barrier for not losing too much water, right? Protects them from desiccation, drying out. And also they have the muscles are attached inside of the exoskeleton. As a result, they shows a tremendous strength. The problem with that, whenever you literally encased, you cannot grow. And this is why they have to go through the exodus. Periodically, they literally will they will shed that particular shell apart or exoskeleton, and during that particular time they grow, and then the exoskeleton will harden. During that particular growth stage, they are very vulnerable. Think about the vertebrates, humans, how we grow. We grow slowly over a period of time until we reach what about 20-25. This is where our growth stops. So we're starting from the little babies and we're slowly growing. It might not be a perfect straight line. It goes up and down, but generally we are on that particular curve. Now, what happens with the arthropods? Arthropods starting, they are in an exoskeleton, they do not grow, and then they shed. So they have very fast growth spur, and then they do not they do not grow, and then they shed again, growth spurs, and then so they will have kind of staircase, so to speak, growth pattern. Make sense? So muscles are attached inside. As a result, they are extremely strong comparatively to us. For example, like a little flea can jump 60 to 100 its body length. But think about it. I'm roughly 6 feet tall. If I will be able to jump 600 feet up, that would be terrific. I cannot do that, right? So yeah, because my skeleton is inside and the muscles are attached from the inside, and they have a slightly different mechanics, so to speak. So body segments are fused in various ways, but generally we recognize the head, the chest, and the kind of stomach, abdomen. Sometimes the head and the chest will be fused together, something known as a cephalothorax or anything like that, and we'll talk a little bit, and this is how we're breaking down arthropods into different groups. And also the number of legs. I will give you right away. The classes will be divided on number of legs. Like for example, spiders. If you grab a spider, or don't grab the spider, if you observe the spider, how many legs spider has? The spider will have 4 pairs. If you grab a crawfish or observe the crawfish, how many legs the crawfish has? 10 legs, 5 pairs. If you look at any kind of insect, you're counting the legs, and it will be 3 pairs of the legs. And millipedes, centipedes will have more than that, and we'll discuss that momentarily. So here we go. Here's the exodus. As a matter of fact, we have a cicada, it's transparent, soft, and during that particular time, it's growing really, really fast until the exoskeleton will solidify. But during that particular time, it's very, very vulnerable because it cannot fly. The wings will not be able to flap enough for it to move the whole entire body. So head and abdomen, already talk about that. Tons of sensors. As a result, they will have a brain. Quite often they have a very complex courtship process, and so on and so forth. Gas exchange, different for different groups, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Heart pumps a hemolymph. That's the name of the blood. It's not really a blood, because remember, they have an open circulatory system, so it's not exactly the blood. So it spills out into the guts, essentially, outside of the guts. Highly organized central nervous system, but unlike the vertebrates, remember, we have a highly centralized nervous system, tons of receptors, but we have a brain and the vertebral column goes on the back. In those particular creatures, they have a brain, not exactly the same as ours, but the nerve ganglia or nerve cord, nerve chain will be going on front on the ventral side. So they have different types of the eyes, not as ours. They are known as the compound eyes. This is where the eyes made out of many, well, most of them, not like, let's say spiders don't have the compound eyes essentially, but insects as well as the crustaceans have a compound eyes, and this is the large eyes, which is made out of smaller eyes. And the compound eye, like let's say the dragonflies can have up to 40,000 smaller eyes inside of it. It's an image forming, but it's a lesser definition than ours, and I'll show you some of the examples. Some of them have a hearing organs. Many of them can produce sounds. If you look at the cockroach, you will not be able to find ears on a cockroach, because the cockroach has the hearing organs literally on its legs. Literally on the legs, very easy to check. If you grab a cockroach, put it on the table and yell at it, and it will run away, right? Yes, because it heard you, it got scared and it runs away. If you'll take the cockroach, pull the legs, don't do that though. It's a cruel to the animal. But if you pull it out, put it on the table, you yell at it, and it will not run away, because now it's deaf, it does not hear you. So yes, but jokes aside, it really has its own, the hearing organs are located on the legs, vibration. So don't have to worry about the research. Trilobites, the very first group. Let me show you the guys of the trilobite thingy, and here we go. That's the actual. Oh, I have a better one. Hold on. Have the old fossil. Here's the trilobite. All right. So this is trilobite. Tri means three lobes. You can see the left, the central, and the right side of the creature. All of them were, as far as we understand, marine creatures, and heavily armored. As you can see, we can still see the shells. Well, it's a fossilized trilobite, but they had the compound eyes, and three parts of the body. Again, avoid flat and heavily armored. They were basically kind of lurking on the bottom of the ocean, getting whatever they could. And again, it's divided into a central and two lateral, right and left lobes. They most likely had some sort of antennas, and they had the compound eyes. So very interesting group. Unfortunately for us, they all extinct. And this is one of the examples of the trilobites. So again, you see the central part, the medial, and then the lateral sides. And you can see tons of legs, segmented body. And now you're looking at the head, right? And then you're looking, this is one eye, this is another eye. If you'll ever be in the Houston Museum of Natural Science, I would highly recommend you to go to the paleontology hall. We have a really nice collection. I mean, world-class collection of in that particular museum. So next group. So again, those ones, trilobites. There is several things going on. We don't really know, but some of the scientists saying this is the first arthropods or ancestors of all the modern arthropods. Trilobites split up. All of them died during the Permian extinction, roughly 300 millions of years ago. 250. So anyway, so basically what they're saying, the trilobites give us the branch to the crustaceans, give us branch to the Helicerata, give us a branch to the insects. That's one of the ideas. Another idea is saying, no. We had the ancestor arthropods, and trilobites were just one of the branches from the main trunk of the arthropods, and the crustaceans separate, the insects separate, and so on. So, and that one was cut off because all of the trilobites died off during the Permian extinction. So next group, Helicerat, basically arachnids and a horseshoe crab. Arachnids, you know, that's the spiders and such as ticks and mites. And the horseshoe crab, a very interesting creature. They are living along the side of the trilobites. The trilobites and the horseshoe crab, you can trace them down, horseshoe crab, about 300 millions of years ago. However, horseshoe crabs are still alive nowadays. The main idea is they have a fang-like structures known as a helicera, used to bite the prey. Most of them are, well, spiders pretty much exclusively predators. Mites can suck the either juices from the plants or the living creatures, ticks, right? And then they have a second appendages, which is known as the pedipalps. They are helping with the positioning the food, grasping organs. And also they have a sensory, touch, smell, well, not smell, taste, chemical one, which is taste and smell, the same thing. Two major body regions known as the cephalothorax, also known as the prosoma. If you call it cephalothorax, I'll be okay with it, but technical name is the prosoma. And then there is a opistosoma, which is essentially the abdomen. If you say cephalothorax and abdomen, I'll be okay with it. I'm coming from the insect background, but some of the, I have a friend who is an arachnologist, and periodically I'm saying, well, that's really nice cephalothorax on that particular spider. And he's like, it's not cephalothorax, it's a prosoma. I'm like, cephalothorax, it's fused head and thorax, right? So yeah, some people might get a little bit too touchy. I don't, as long as you understand that they have only two parts. So in this particular case, yeah, arachnida, spiders, scorpions, mice, and ticks, they have something which is known as the book lungs. Essentially, and at some point of time, it was the legs which are flattened out, got inside the body, and this is and become very, very thin. As a result, you see they look under the microscope, under dissecting scope, as the pages of the book, hence the name, book lungs. The spiders in toxins into the digestive enzymes. Essentially, spiders cannot chew. So what exactly happens with the spider when it catches a prey, let's say a fly? It will disable the fly with extremely potent toxin, and then it will start pumping in the digestive enzyme, and then it will wait for a little while until those digestive enzymes will digest the prey, a fly, inside. And then this spider bites it again. And then now with the heliceras, basically a tube slurping everything, whatever has been digested back. Nice. And then, of course, they have a spider wall that they are creating a protein, which is solidifies, creating kind of silk, extremely strong material. As a matter of fact, comparatively to the steel, spider silk is stronger. So if you have, let's say, a rope made out of steel, weaved out of the steel or silk, spider silk will do that. Generally, we're not using it to make any clothes whatsoever. However, because it's very, very hard to use. Well, the spiders do not produce too much. However, in some cases, like I think Louis XVII or 13th, one of the Louis French kings, he received on one of his birthday, he received a pair of gloves made out of spider silk. And then, of course, mites, ants, and ticks feeds on blood. And here's a tiny little bit. Yeah, okay. And merastomata, that's the horseshoe crabs. I'll show you. They are bottom feeders in shallow coastal water. They can be found all over the east side of Atlantic Ocean, here, literally from Canada all the way to, I don't know if we have them in Mexico. Most likely we do. Not 100% sure. In Florida for sure. And then somebody in 50s or 60s for one or another reason brought a couple of those horseshoe crabs here in Galveston. They dropped them in and they survived. We have a small population of horseshoe crabs living here. Very, very interesting group of creatures. Once again, survived for over like 300 million. So this is a spider, this is a wolf spider. As you can see, 2 large eyes, and then there will be like 6. Usually the spiders have 8 eyes, and the rest of them will be surrounded, well, will be located on top of the head, so the spider don't have to turn its head in order to see, per se. It might turn the whole body if it will see the if it will say to expose the larger eyes to the prey or anything like that. But as you can see, it has the brain, very quite complex behavior for those creatures. And here we're looking at the book lungs, as you can see, where they probably were like appendages. Most likely it was the appendages, but which has been moved in to protect, and now they look like pages from the book. And then, of course, they have legs, and again, it's 4 pairs of legs. They have the helicera, usually poison gland. We have quite a few creatures, the spiders, which might be deadly to human beings, black widows, for example, right? And then the pedipalps is the appendage which helps with the prey, so to speak. So here we have scorpions. We have here in Texas, actually, I think they are moving all the way. They prefer drier area. Another living fossils, there is some of the creatures which can be found in the amber, and they look almost identical as the modern scorpions. And then, of course, that's a female with the bunch of little ones it carries. Here is the tick. This is the dust. Dust mites are everywhere, including your bed. Tiny little bitty creatures feeding off any kind of dead organic material. We're talking about dead skin cells, and plus water from your sweat. You might heard that the mattress double its weight every 15 years or 8 or 10 years, whatever. That's partially because of those creatures. So essentially, you're never alone. There is a group of dust mites which actually live on our faces. They are feeding off, and so they depend on you. And that's why they call it dermato. Dermatos means skin. So yes, we are filled up with those particular creatures. I know sounds nasty, but once again, they do not parasitize on us, not really. They're just feeding off whatever we're providing them. And then, of course, we have a typical spider. Killed the grasshopper, infected with the venom first to kill it, and then with the digestive juices, waiting for it to get digested. So, and this is the creatures known as the horseshoe crab. As you can see, they are quite odd-looking creatures, and I will talk about those in the lab. But here's the cephalothorax, or apistosoma, prosoma, and then there is an apistosoma on the abdomen. Those ones are not stingers. They call telsons. They're not stingers. We're not 100% sure why they have those. Some of the scientists suggesting that they're using them for mating rituals, like males will fend off or something like that, but they definitely not the stingers. So here's the horseshoe crab. We'll discuss those creatures in the lab. I mean, not this one, next lab. Now, myriapoda, centipedes and millipedes. Myria means many legs, centi means hundreds, milli means thousands. So 2 body regions, the head and the body, trunk, so to speak. The difference between those, a trunk, a segment in a trunk, if it has only 2 legs or 1 pair of legs, that's a centipede. If it has 2 pairs of legs per segment, it would be a millipede. Centipedes are fast, really fast quite vicious predators, and they have helicerates, and they inject the toxins. Some of them can give you a powerful, very powerful bite. The largest centipede here, well, in Houston area, they stay small, about the inch or so. I have them in the backyard, and are harmless to humans. They will not be able to penetrate the human skin. However, in the San Antonio area, in the drier area, once or twice I found a centipede which was about 6, 7, maybe 8 inches. Those ones can most likely bite through the skin, and therefore they will inject toxins. So I didn't mess with those much. And then the millipedes are much slower. They are really nice, powerful herbivores, as well as the scavengers. They feeding off the dead leaves, etc. So important group. We talk about 300 millions of years ago, where there was a lot of oxygen, and the oxygen is important for concentration of the oxygen in the atmosphere, important to keep those creatures relatively small. But 300, 250 millions of years ago, those creatures were relatively large. High level of oxygen, almost double the amount of oxygen we have right now. Millipedes grew about 10 or so feet long. All right. Centipedes were about 4 feet long. Now think about it. The creature about 8 inches long can deliver a powerful bite to a human being. Centipede 4 feet long now, we would be a really nice snack for those particular creatures. They're fast, they are vicious, and basically they are completely automated to attack any kind of prey they can find, and we would not be able to outrun those creatures either. So here we're looking at the centipede. As you can see, tons of segments and 2 pairs of legs per segment. Here we have a centipede, again segments, but now it's only 1 pair of legs coming out from the segments, and you'll see it on in the lab as well. I'll take maybe a little bit longer to finish up with the lecture today, so we'll be done with the protostomes. So crustaceans. Crustaceans, again, seafood, if you really like it, shrimp, lobster, crabs, crawfish, all of those. Fused cephalothorax, separate abdomen, exoskeleton, refer carapax. We'll talk about that a little bit during the lab. And now they have 5 pair of appendages. Remember, the trilobites had a lot of appendages. Millipedes, centipedes, a lot of appendages. Arachnids, specifically spiders, 4 pair of appendages. Those ones mostly have 5 pairs of appendages, so 10 legs. That's why one of the largest groups of the crustacean, known as a decapod. They have a chemical touch receptors, compound eyes. They have a special statocyst in the head to balance the body in 3-dimensional space. Tons of hairs throughout the carapax. That's a sensory, because remember, their skin is covered by the exoskeleton. So in order to sense anything, they have to have tons of hairs. Those particular hairs, the hairs, they are similar to the insect, and you will see the picture of, I think that's a close-up of the fly. You will see it's covered with the sensory hairs. So yes, it goes through the exoskeleton to say, well, to feel the touch or anything like that. So copypods are extremely important part of the life, zooplankton, and that particular zooplankton is actually sustaining one of the largest creatures on Earth, right? Anybody heard about whale sharks? What the whale sharks do? They are literally swimming with their mouths open, and they're getting as much plankton as possible. Majority of that would be a copypods. Same plankton. Same thing with the whales, regular mammals, whales. Largest creatures, largest mammals on the face of the Earth. Again, feeding off the plankton. Complex gills, we'll talk about that. I'll show you in the lab. You're removing the carapax. There will be a bunch of gills. Sexes are typically separate. Now we don't really look at the hermaphrodites, males and females. Usually they have a complex courtship rituals. The same thing with arachnids, same thing with the insects. In order to identify, that's one of the prezygotic barriers, the proper song of the cicada, the proper shrill of the grasshopper, so anything like that. After the eggs will be carried by the female, the eggs will hatch in a free-swimming larvae, and then the larvae goes through the series of exodus, so molts will become a smaller creature which grows and grows until it will reach the adult size. So crab, lobster, and shrimps, known as the decapoda, marine as well as the freshwater habitats, you most likely see them. Shrimp, we live on Galveston Bay, so you most likely see the crabs and shrimp, and you're going into pretty much any many of the stores carries the live lobster and red lobster as the restaurant or anything like that, not advertised. So in this particular case, they have tons of appendages, 19 pairs of the appendages, all different, but again, walking legs are 10 of them. Well, first one is the pincers, of course, etc. So, and then there is another very interesting barnacles. As a matter of fact, barnacles will start looking like the some of the mollusks, because they are located in a calcified cup shell, similar to that, and they are sessile. They're sitting, and again, they are grabbing or any kind of plankton. So they start looking very similar to the bivalves, but they are not bivalves, they're actually crustaceans. And the larvae are free swimming, and this is how they spread, similar to a bivalves again. So here we're looking at the crabs, the blue lobster, right? And you can see the halipid and 1, 2, 3, 4 walking legs, and there is a swimmerets. They help them with the swim, but also those particular swimmerets sending the water under the carapax, and this is where the gills are located. The tailson, well, and we talk about the head, and we'll cover it a little bit more during the next lab. So here we're looking at the gooseneck barnacle. So again, look very similar to the mollusk. Not a mollusk as an adult, it's actually a creature which has legs, but it has the same type of life, sitting, sucking the water in. As a result, it starts looking so convergent evolution. Finally, my favorite group, known as a hexapoda. Hexa means six-legged creatures, the most diverse and successful group of animals on Earth. Multiple mouth parts. Most of them are able to fly. One pair of sensory antennas. The crustaceans have 2 pairs of appendages, two pairs of sensory antennas. So 4 antennas total. The insects have 2 antennas, right? And the spiders don't have any antennas. So thorax, they have a head, thorax and abdomen. Thorax usually bears 3 pairs of walking legs, hence the name hexapoda, and usually 2 pairs of wings. And that's one of the reasons why we think those particular creatures are so successful. They are the first one who conquered the air. Digestive system as well as the reproductive system, they have an open circulatory system, but in addition to that, they have a very interesting tracheal system. This is what keeps most of the insects relatively small. Tracheal system is the system of tubes which goes throughout the body of the insect, delivering oxygen to the tissues directly. Blood or hemolymph, technically speaking, do not bring any oxygen whatsoever. So they have a very specific tracheal system, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we'll discuss the gas exchange, the anatomy unit and the unit number 5. And they have a very curious way how to excrete the waste, and they have tubes. So excretory system is represented by a very specific tubes known as a Malpighian. Malpighian was the name of the guy who discovered those. So diverse, very diverse class, dragonflies, then the praying mantis. Actually, I saw the praying mantis yesterday, day before on Sunday on the backyard, a relatively large female. And then the Coleoptera, that's the largest, the beetles are the largest class out of them all. And then of course the fleas, and then the Diptera, any kind of mosquitoes, and then Lepidoptera. And then this is the group which I was specializing on as a Hymenoptera, the ants, the bees, etc., wasps. So in this particular case, if you'll see that many of the Latin names have that particular suffix, ptera. Ptera means wing. So see, Coleoptera, Hymenoptera, Lepidoptera, Diptera, Siphonoptera. So something to do with the wings. This is one of the ways how we classify the insects. Coleoptera, coleos means hard. The first pair of wings is hard. It's additional protection. Underneath of the first pair, they have the nice transparent wings, which allow them to fly. Most of the beetles can fly. You probably seen the June beetles, not the June bugs. Not the best flyers ever, but still they are pretty good on that. Lepidoptera. Lepidos means scales. The wings of the butterflies as well as the moths will be covered by the scales. I'll show you the micro photographs of that. Hymenos. Hymenos means membranous. You see the membranous wings in the ants? No, you don't. That's the working ants. Working ants don't have wings. But the males and the true males and true females in the essentially the queens. Queen, when it's a young one, it has the wings. After the copulation, after it will get sperm from the male, it will literally go and rip the wings out, and then it will settle down on the colony. But bees will have a very nice 4 pairs, 2 pairs, 4 wings, membranous wings. Same thing with the bumblebees, same thing with the wasps. Now these particular creatures, our favorite, right, the flies as well as the mosquitoes, it has only 2 visible wings, hence the name Diptera. Technically they have 4 wings, but the other pair, the second pair, is reduced to a drastically small part, which allows them to balance it out. If you remove the second pair, the mosquito or a fly will not be able to go in a straight. It will be all. Think about like a helicopter, right? Helicopter has 2 rotors, the main rotor and the rotor. Typically, yes, I know there is some of the helicopters have 2 rotors going in opposite direction, but generally most of the helicopters have a main rotor for flying, and then the other one which will be guiding. So if you'll take the smaller rotor out, the helicopter will go in spin. Same kind of idea. Stabilization in the air. I think I already show you that particular creature. Once again, that's my favorite. That's a tiny little bitty wasp, about ½ inch long. You see 1 pair of antenna, the head, the compound eyes, 1 pair of antenna, compound eyes. Here we have 3 simple eyes. Then there is a thorax. The thorax has 3 pairs of legs and 2 pairs of membranous wings, and then there is the abdomen. And then of course that's the Lindenius. That's my favorite species of them all. Lindenius yakushkini, named after my last name by a friend of mine. So in this particular, yes, that's a new species. He identified it and he named it. The external anatomy: head, again, thorax, wings. That one is the grasshoppers group known as Artopteros. Orthos means straight wing ones, straight wings. So in the digestive system, Again, look at the brain, well, not digestive, in the internal anatomy, brain, and then the nerve cord goes kind of in the front. The digestive system goes into the crop, and then there will be something which is known as a digestive, and then the intestines will have those particular finger-like projections coming out. Those are Malpighian tubes. And what exactly is happening? Remember, the blood vessel, well, several hearts will pump the blood vessel, well, the blood through the blood vessels, and then it will spill out. So all of those organs are bathing in the blood, taking the nutrients and dumping the waste into the blood or hemolymph. And now what's happening, whenever the hemolymph coming through that, the Malpighian tubes will be sticking out into a hemolymph, now absorbing the wastes and moving them into the intestine, and then with the feces out. And then, of course, it has the ovaries right here, located right next to the digestive system, because the eggs will require a lot of nutrients. So sensory systems are extremely very well developed. The image-forming eyes, the touch-sensitive hear, sound, and the chemical senses are extremely well developed. Like a male moth can smell a female, literally a female moth. Well, some of them, not all of them, but some of them can smell it a couple of miles away. It's like, no, female. And again, moth is a type of kind of like a butterfly, but they're usually active at night, so they cannot see much during the night. But the female will be producing a pheromones, special chemicals, and the male can sense them quite nicely. So here we're looking at the close-up of the common household fly, and you can see each one of those dots are the compound eye and other compound eye, but each one of those dots are simple eyes. Usually there is a 3 simple eyes on top of the head. As a result, they don't really have to turn the head much to see what's happening behind. That's why even if you're going behind to catch the fly or kill the fly, it'd still be able to see the action, so to speak, the movement. And then tons of hairs, as you can see, and the pair of antennas, which usually carries the chemical smelling sensors. This is what we see, right? That's the masterpiece by Leonardo, a relatively small picture. That's about the size of the picture, actual size of the, well, but big. If you'll ever be in Paris, I would highly recommend you to go to Louvre, and this is where you can find that particular picture. First thing which struck me that it's a relatively small paint. Anyway, this is what we see. Now, what the insect will see approximately. This is what the insect will see. So kind of the outlines, everything is the same, but much less quality, right? Much lower resolution. But they are good with that. So forming the image, but still. The mouth parts we'll talk about. This is the chewing, that's the most common one, and then there is quite a few other ones, the piercing, the sucking one, and so on and so forth. Depends on the group within the group and type of the feeding material they have. Basic post-embryonic development. Actually, we'll talk about the incomplete and complete metamorphosis. Generally speaking, the primitive without the metamorphosis, not so much. This is something which is known as the silverfish, right? So as soon as the egg will hatch, the young will look exactly like adult, just a different size. No metamorphosis. Meta means change, form, morphosis, so changing the form. Now, incomplete metamorphosis. The young one will look very similar to the adult. What's the difference? Wings. The young one will not have until the adult stage. The stage without the wings, known as the nymphs. So whenever it's hatched, you know, it's a true bug right here. It could be a bed bug or anything like that. But in this case, those ones do not have fully developed wings. Only adults do. Right? The assassin bug right here. So whenever it hatches out, you can already see it's a assassin bug, but it's a tiny little bit one. It grows, and this is still a nymph, even though the size-wise it's almost identical as the adult. The adult have a fully developed wings. Many of the well, not many, all of the grasshoppers goes through the incomplete metamorphosis. In the complete metamorphosis, we have the larvae after the hatching will have kind of like a wormy looking creature. So here we go. The egg, the larvae hatches a worm looking creature known as a maggot or caterpillar. Think about the caterpillar. Egg hatches, it goes into an ugly caterpillar which chomping down on the food. Then it goes into a cocoon, chrysalis, pupa, and literally within the pupa, the larvae melting most of its own tissues, reforming the tissues, start making the structures which haven't been there before, such as wings. And then whenever the adult hatches out, we'll end up with the adult creature. In this particular case, that's the fruit fly. But if you'll think about the bees, what exactly was the bees or wasps? Egg will hatch into a worm-looking creatures, then it will go into a pupa, and then we'll end up with the wasp or a bee or an ant. Or in this particular case, again, the butterflies, the egg hatches into a caterpillar, caterpillar grow into a chrysalis, and then we have a beautiful butterfly. So that's a complete metamorphosis, from a worm to a beautiful butterfly, from a worm to a complete worm looking, it's not really a worm, it's a worm looking creature into something much more advanced. Make sense? Make sure you will be able to say the complete versus incomplete metamorphosis. All right, and we're done with the lecture today. So let me kind of